Welcome to the Vocational Expert Views channel. This video is a little bit different in that usually we're discussing disabilities, vocational issues, and TDIU issues. Today we're looking at veterans hurt through FINRA fraud, which is under MMTLP, and it's been going on for 1 year.
Time getting people in the media to actually highlight the story. And over the last 12 months, really the situation has been unfolding in the stock market. And shockingly, it has left over 65,000 families' investments frozen.
Metamaterials reached out to Torchlight to orchestrate a reverse merger, which would allow Metamaterials to trade on the NASDAQ and at the same time create shareholder value for Torchlight Energy Resources shareholders. Metamaterials did not want to be in the oil and gas exploration business. So what ended up happening was they took the assets of Torchlight Energy Resources, which is 134,000 contiguous gross acres in the Oro Grande Basin, and they took those assets and spun them off into a Series A preferred share dividend. What was supposed to happen was either those assets would be spun out into another company or they would sell, which would pay the shareholders. Now, this dividend was never supposed to be made tradable. Fast forward, this was June 2021 when this took place. In October of 2021, all of a sudden, people opened their accounts and noticed that MMTLP was a ticker symbol that was assigned to this Series A preferred share dividend and that it was trading. Nobody knows how it happened because it was against the wishes of the company that issued the dividend. CEO at the time, John Berta, reached out to OTC markets where the security was trading and said, this is not authorized. OTC markets turned around and told John Berta, you need to take this up with FINRA. John Berta reached out to FINRA and FINRA told him, you're not the CEO of the company anymore, so you don't have any standing to bring this up to us. So this thing traded for over a year. Now, in July of 2022, Metamaterials issued an S1, which stated that the company planned on taking these assets and spinning them off into a privately held, publicly reporting company by the name of NextBridge Hydrocarbons. Not a tradable company, not supposed to be tradable. They filed 4 S1s. They went through 4 revisions of their S1 starting in July. And finally, in November of 2022, the SEC had no further comment, so a notice of effectiveness was filed so that the spin-out could then be effectuated. Now, what was supposed to happen was on December 12th, the trading was supposed to stop. There is a timeline on my Twitter account, and it very clearly shows that on December 6th, FINRA released a corporate action notice that stated that the investing public had until the 12th to close their positions. On December 7th, Jeff Mendel, Vice President of OTC Markets, goes on a broadcast and informs the entire investing public that we have until December 12th to close our positions. FINRA released another corporate action the following date stating the same. In that interim time period between December 6th and December 9th, every single major U.S. broker-dealer informed their clients that inquired that we had until December 12th to close our positions, only for us to wake up on December 9th and discover that we were halted. And I sent you a clip of the Vice President of OTC Markets. I don't know if you want to go to it or not.
Absolutely. I think it's very disturbing, some of this information that you're sharing. And it's just shocking that they could get away with things like this. I know we have a clip, and you sent me this clip earlier, and I want to play the clip for the viewers so that they can get a better idea of what you're talking about. And so we're going to play this clip. We're getting it pulled up right now. And this really kind of explains a lot of what you were just talking about. And then, of course, after we play the clip, I want to get your feedback on the clip and kind of your impression of it. Go ahead and play the clip.
basically per FINRA's corporate action or corporate action, right, that came out. Basically, what that means is MMTLP is being deleted as a ticker after the trading day on the 12th. So it's deleted on the 13th, right? And so that means that you no longer are reporting a trade in MMTLP after that date. And so I think it's spinning up into NextBridge hydrocarbons, something like
along those lines.
Something along those lines. As far as where that trades and how that trades, I'm not 100% sure right now. But what I can say though is MMTLP as of the end of trading on the 12th will no longer be on the OTC markets.
And that's the most important point to come across here. If you are holding these shares on the OTC markets, guys, again, end of trading on the 12th. It's coming off of the OTC. There's also a deadline that I saw in this press release of the 12th as well. So any shareholders on record as of the 12th will be involved in this NextBridge hydrocarbons transaction. So the 12th, obviously, the most important date.
So they said the 12th, but the controversy here is that they halted, right, on the 9th. So those were his own words, and that is going to be used against him. I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, right? It's pretty cut and dry.
It's very simple. This was December 7th. The halt came on December 9th, and the halt was unforeseen. And because of that, this halt caused short positions to be unresolved, fails to deliver to go uncured, and millions of other what are believed to be counterfeit shares that are believed to exist to now be carried over into what is a private non-trading company. Subsequently, because there are so many additional shares above and beyond that legally authorized amount, there is a significant, massive amount of people, like you said, over 65,000 families that don't have access to their money. They've been deprived of their rights to a free and fair market, and they haven't even been delivered their shares in the private company. It has caused a mess, and that's pretty much the long and short of it.
So what reasons have they given for the halt, and what exactly is the SEC doing about this?
So back in March, on March 16th, FINRA released an FAQ to the investing public. It has since been debunked every which way imaginable. But one of the things that they stated was that they halted it because they were protecting unsuspecting buyers that would have bought on the 9th and the 12th, which doesn't make any sense because the communications that we got from our brokers clearly spelled out that this was supposed to be position close only on the 9th and the 12th, which means no new buyers. That last 2 days, obviously, the 9th and 12th never happened, caused short positions to go into the private company, and we've been stuck ever since.
So what you're saying then is you've basically been stuck for an entire year, you and 65,000 other American families. Those are families. And so that's a lot of people. Those are actual families. And when you imagine how many people are within a family, just think of how many Americans this is actually impacting. These people have been stuck for over a year without their money and their shares. And so how has this personally affected you, and how is this impacting and affecting these families? It's probably upwards of over 100,000 people if we're talking about 65,000 families, depending on the size of the family, maybe even more.
Absolutely. It's been devastating. Thankfully, I'm okay, but I've seen some really devastating consequences left in the wake of this situation. We've seen homes be lost to foreclosures. People have gotten divorced. People have had their savings wiped out, stress-related illness. And in one case, 2 little girls in the state of Arizona no longer have someone to call daddy. And as the father of a 4-year-old little girl, I can't tell you what that does. But the
what do you mean? What do you mean by that? They don't have someone to call daddy. Are you saying that somebody committed suicide over this?
Yes.
Oh my God, this is so awful. That is terrible. And how long ago did they commit suicide?
My understanding, it was shortly after the halt. And that's why we're here, and that's why we're fighting, not only to reach a resolution that's fair.
And now it has raised all kinds of questions related to regulatory oversight. And joining me tonight to discuss the situation and how it could potentially affect the investments of anyone with a dollar in the U.S. stock market is Drew Diligent. So, Drew, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's a pleasure to have you. And we're really looking forward to you sharing your insight on this scandal. That's what I'm calling it. It's a scandal. It's financial terrorism, in my opinion. And I'm really shocked that the mainstream media isn't talking about this more. And it's been kind of under wraps in terms of how involved Congress has been in these last few weeks. But apparently there are some members of Congress who have gotten involved, and we're going to talk about this. So how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, Laura. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I really honestly was not too familiar with this, and I got in touch with you and I started reading all of the comments in my chat on Tuesday, and it was distracting because I was reading the chat and I noticed that everybody started spamming the chat with MMTLP, and I was like, what is MMTLP? And I realized, oh yeah, that's what I was tweeting about earlier today. And I didn't really know too much about it. And I started reading more, and I just felt that this story was so egregious and so many people have been negatively impacted by it that I wanted to have you on to talk about this because I think that it deserves more attention. So can you just give the viewers kind of a brief Cliff Notes overview of what has happened and what's going on and why anybody who is invested in the U.S. stock market should be worried about this?
To the people that are suffering, but at the same time to make sure that something like this doesn't happen anymore. There's obviously a gap somewhere, and we're here to fight to make sure that it gets fixed.
Yeah, and I know that you mentioned Arizona, and you said that Congressman Eli Crane is one of the congressmen that has gotten involved in this. What other members of Congress have gotten involved? We have a letter. I know that you sent me a letter earlier that is a letter that was really signed by several members of Congress, not a ton when you look at all the members that are in Congress, but who exactly has been receptive to hearing your concerns and who in Congress is advocating on your behalf? And are you noticing more support from Republicans, Democrats, or is it fairly bipartisan?
So the first person to put out a letter for us was Congressman Eli Crane. Our community, we have a community of about 2,000 people or so, 2,000 to 3,000 people. We broke off into state groups and we started rallying to our congressional representatives for help here. The Arizona state group was the first one to produce a measurable result with Congressman Eli Crane. He put out a letter for us. Shortly after that, 15 members of the House Committee on Financial Services, mainly Republicans, also put out a letter on our behalf. But since then, we've also seen Congresswoman Norma Torres, Senator Crapo, David Valadeo, Jared Huffman, Vicente Gonzalez, and Josh Harder all put out letters on our behalf. And there is a major effort underway now to have an open letter that is hopefully going to be signed by dozens of congressional representatives, if not over 100, we hope, which will hopefully carry a very powerful message, ask some very powerful questions, and be impossible for the SEC to ignore.
You say has been the most helpful, though, because anybody can sign their name to a letter, right? It doesn't really take much effort to do that. Who is your biggest fighter right now, would you say, in Congress?
Honestly, we've had such tremendous help from Pete Sessions. We've had tremendous help from Rep. Ralph Norman. There's a gentleman in the state of West Virginia. His name is Chris Rose. He's running for state senate. He was running on the federal level. He was instrumental in opening a lot of doors for us as well.
That's really nice. I'm happy to hear that you found some advocates at least. How many people within your community are on social media? And are these professional traders or are these just everyday people, ordinary Americans?
No. Yeah, as I said before, there's about 2,000 to 3,000 people, and they come from all walks of life. We're talking about first responders, we're talking about teachers, we're talking about retirees, and we're also talking about military veterans. And this is something I'd like to spend a minute talking about.
Yeah, go ahead.
Out of our 2,000 to 3,000 shareholder group, we've discovered roughly 140 military veterans with over $12 million of their money frozen in this situation. If you take that line and you extrapolate it outwards for upwards of 65,000 shareholders, you're talking about thousands of military veterans with up to $500 million of their money frozen. And I just want to draw attention to one name, if I may. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Alan Bradshaw. Lieutenant Colonel Alan Bradshaw flew Marine One for 2 presidents, Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. If you've ever seen a picture of Ronald Reagan outside of Marine One, you might notice the pilot that's smiling gleefully at the camera. He's a handsome guy, too. That is Lieutenant Colonel Alan Bradshaw. And this has been devastating to him, just as it's been devastating to everybody who's been stuck in this thing. But the people come from all walks of life.
It sounds devastating. What have the brokers said to people who have asked them about where their money and their shares are? Especially the guy on that interview that said that people had until the 12th to get their money out.
Yeah, so the guy on the interview was actually the vice president of OTC Markets, where this was trading. We inquired with our brokers after this call, and they basically have all given us different stories. What we're supposed to be able to do is transfer our shares to the transfer agent, which basically directly registers the shares in your name. The problem is that these brokerages are giving us the runaround. They're saying, yeah, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, it's going to cost something when the S1 clearly states it shouldn't cost you anything. And then people pay the freight to get their shares transferred. They say it takes 6 to 8 weeks. And then on the 3rd or 4th week, they kick your shares back saying that your transfer has been terminated. It has been really, there has been a real breakdown of continuity amongst the brokers. And I just want to point one out in particular. Fidelity. For some strange reason, Fidelity has sent 1099-Bs to clients who own this security that never sold a share and got halted, which state basically put the obligation on them to pay capital gains taxes on a security that they never realized a penny of gain from. So you get that? You're a Fidelity shareholder. You get halted on the 9th. Your money is frozen, and now they want you to pay capital gains taxes on it. And Fidelity is the only brokerage in the United States so far that we know that has done this. And just to kind of go back to the devastation that this has caused, I want to tell you a quick story about a gentleman named Juan. Juan has a 14-year-old daughter who just underwent chemotherapy treatments because she was diagnosed with stage 4 lupus. Juan is staring down the barrel of a $250,000 medical bill. And to add insult to injury, Fidelity is his broker. So not only is his money frozen, but they're actually trying to force him to pay capital gains taxes on his investment that he never made a penny on. And that just shows you the lack of continuity and regulatory oversight amongst the brokers.
Yeah, it sounds devastating. It sounds like people's lives are just being completely destroyed over this. Which leads me to my next questions. My next question, has there been any lawsuits filed over this? Or are there any ongoing efforts to pursue litigation?
Yeah, there have been 5 different legal efforts in 5 different states. Actually, now there's a new one in Florida from Steamroller. California, Georgia, Florida, Washington, and in the state of New York, a petition was filed under CPLR Section 3102, which basically allows you to do discovery before filing a claim against anyone so that you can ascertain who it is you have to file a claim against. All of these legal actions are simply seeking transparency from FINRA. They're not asking largely for monetary damages. We just want answers. We just want to know how many shares were sold to the investing public. It's a simple share count. And not only has FINRA refused to provide a share count to this point, but what they've done is they've fought every single legal action that is simply calling on them to be transparent. If you think
and
about
if you can too, just because not everybody, this is a political show, right? And so I don't know if everybody really knows what FINRA is. If you can go ahead and explain to the viewers watching who may be hearing this information for the first time what FINRA is.
Yeah, so the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, really has ultimate oversight, but they delegate some of the responsibilities, especially with respect to stocks that trade on the OTC. They delegate a lot of those responsibilities to FINRA. FINRA is supposed to have the oversight. They are the regulator. They're also an SRO, which means that they have absolute immunity, and anytime someone tries to sue them, they claim absolute immunity. Did you lose me?
I can hear you. For some reason, your image is off. I can hear you. I can hear you. You're still there.
Okay. You're better looking than I am.
No, I can hear you. Go ahead. I can still hear you.
Yeah. So the FINRA has immunity, but they are the regulator that is tasked with overseeing all of this. And every time we go after them with a legal effort, they say, nope, we have absolute immunity. The crazy thing about this is I shouldn't have to sue the United States Army to protect me against a foreign invasion. We are literally having to take legal actions against FINRA to do the very thing that they are supposed to do, and they haven't done.
Well, as you've probably seen, our country is pretty dysfunctional right now. What has FINRA or the SEC said in response to all of this so far?
Okay, so Gary Gensler, so first of all, FINRA released 2 FAQs. The first one was back in March, that was debunked. The second one was released in early November. Now,
and for people watching, just because this is your jargon, right? For people watching who don't know what an FAQ is, explain. Just because we have some people who may not really understand the terminology watching, I just want to make sure that everybody can understand, what they're hearing.
Yeah, so FINRA's been getting a lot of questions, both from Congress and from the investing public.
Okay.
So, and this is the first time that they've ever had to publish an FAQ on a specific security. They've never had to do this before. Now they've done it twice. And both times, those FAQs have been proven to be, I want to use the words opaque. Case in point, the second FAQ, the first FAQ was released in March, and since March, we had a bunch of letters from Congress come out because their FAQ didn't answer any questions. And then again, in November, they released another FAQ, which didn't tell us much. But what happened after that was we got even more letters from Congress and this gigantic open letter effort coming as well. What FINRA did tell us in their FAQ is that there are 2.65 million short shares that have been carried over into this private company. And it doesn't make any sense because if this company begins paying dividends, and let's say 10 years from now they continue to pay dividends, if the person on the short side of a transaction is supposed to pay whoever is on the long side of the transaction for the dividend. So if the person on the short side of the transaction, let's say, is no longer with us, who's supposed to pay that dividend? That's why short shares are typically not carried over into companies that are not tradable. Now, Gary Gensler has appeared twice before 2 different committees of jurisdiction, Senate Banking and the House Committee on Financial Services. And Mike Crapo, God bless him, grilled Gary Gensler for 5 minutes on this thing. And Mr. Gensler was very evasive. He wouldn't be specific. He wouldn't provide answers. What he did do was say that we can't release any information on anything that may or may not have an investigation. But if you send me your requests, we can respond to you in writing with the data. And we just found out yesterday or the day before via FOIA that the response that Gary Gensler gave to Senator Crapo's inquiries stated we can't release any information through a quote-unquote active investigation. It has been over a year. No charges have been filed against anyone, and they're still hiding under the cloak of this active investigation.
All right, well, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a minute, and some people will say, I don't know what you're complaining about because everybody knows that when you invest your money into the stock market, your return isn't guaranteed, and that you could always run the risk of losing your entire investment. So what do you have to say to someone who is listening to you say all of this right now, or is looking at this this situation and all these people, these 65,000 Americans who have lost their money, and the people that say, well, you know, when you invest in the stock market, you run the risk of losing all your money? What do you have to say to those people?
So I can appreciate the inherent risk that comes along with investing in the stock market. If I invest in a company and the company goes bankrupt, that's on me. If I invest in a company and the CEO of the company is indicted for laundering money for El Chapo, you know what? That kind of stuff happens. But if I invest in a security that is set to spin out, and the brokerage, the regulator, and the vice president of the market where it is trading all tell me that I have until December 12th to close my position, only for them to halt it on December 9th within 48 hours of that statement being made, inherent risk is not supposed to mean that everybody tells me that I have until the 12th to sell, only to wake up on the 9th and find out that I'm halted. I'm sorry, I don't accept that as an answer for those reasons.
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from. How does this affect the United States stock market in general, would you say?
You know, that's a really good question. It is, so the issue at hand here is really the practice of naked shorting and selling counterfeit shares. The security, we believe, was made tradable because there was a large imbalance in Torchlight, and they wanted to find a way to make this tradable so that they wouldn't have to cover short positions. How it affects the broader market in general, even just a couple of months ago, Elon Musk was talking about how he suspected that there was some abusive short selling going on within his own security. The fact of the matter is that it is believed that, I can tell you now, they didn't just wake up one day and decide they were going to do this to one security and they were never going to touch any other security. If you have $1 in any security in the United States stock market, you are at risk. Now, the difference between this situation and those other situations is that we are actually frozen in time, which means that we can actually get the share count, get the data, ascertain the imbalance, and stop something like this from ever happening again. But as long as these practices continue to go on Wall Street, your 401k, your IRA, your investments, your savings, all of them are at risk.
So you're in touch with members of Congress right now. What is the next step, or where does it currently stand with actions that are being taken by members of Congress? Do you have any new updates? Because this has been going on for 12 months now. And obviously, you know, Congress moves slow, but have you heard anything recent? What is the most recent update you can give our viewers from Congress and where this stands currently?
So in our question, Laura, if I may.
Yeah.
Do you have a 401k or an IRA or any retirement plans or anything out there?
Not right now, no.
Yeah. So the reason why I ask this question is, if you have a 401k or an IRA, the practice of counterfeit shares and naked shorting, it literally drives these companies, their prices down, and it could potentially drive them out of business. Companies go out of business all the time. They go belly up from these abusive short selling practices. Mainly, it's these companies that don't have much cash on hand. But if you have a 401k or an IRA, they can sell shares that don't exist, which would then suppress the price, and it strips the entire American public of their wealth. And like I said before, the MMTLP situation is unique in that if we actually get a share count and we expose this practice, obviously the next logical question for our legislators is, how did this happen, and what legislation do we have to pass so that the regulatory framework does not allow for the wealth of the American public and hardworking people across the world that invest to have their money stripped from them?
Yeah.
Anyone with a 401k or an IRA is at risk here.
Yeah, I don't really have anything right now because